Oh boy, Security Breach Ruin has only been out for a few days, and yet, despite it probably being the most confusing FNAF game to date, thanks to the community's insane efforts to tear this game apart from the inside out, I think I've found one hell of a way to solve this thing already. So today, I'll be presenting two very plausible theories about Security Breach Ruin, and then at the end of the video, I'll share an Easter egg in the game that I think could be our smoking gun, which snowballs into a ton of evidence about which of the two theories is correct. And now, I think that the biggest question we should be asking ourselves about this game isn't whether or not the Burn Trap ending or the Princess Quest endings are canon here, but rather, which is better, AR or VR? Let me explain. So, a quick spoilery recap for all those who don't know. The DLC revolves around a girl named Cassie, who is responding to a distress call from the previous protagonist, Gregory, who now claims to be trapped at the bottom of the now ruined Pizzaplex. And as she dives deeper and deeper, she uses the AR Vanny mask to deactivate security nodes at Gregory's request, only to make it to the basement not to find Gregory, but the mimic from the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, who has just fooled her into deactivating the security protocols meant to contain it. It is then that the real Gregory finally makes contact with her and attempts to help her escape, only to apparently change his mind and leave her behind to somehow prevent the mimic's escape. And this all ties back into the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, which, through a log story, are most certainly canon to the Security Breach timeline now, unlike the previous FNAF tie-in books were. And one has to remember, as complicated as these books can be, they really only revolve around two primary reoccurring themes. The first of which is the Mimic, a rogue AI and robot who wreaks havoc wherever it goes. And secondly is the theme of altered reality, with the books being chock full of magical AR and VR devices that can, at the very least, read minds, and at the very most, can literally change reality and allow access to the spiritual world and the world of dreams. And yeah, I know, Scott's sons obviously gave Scott the wrong CBD gummy before he went to the FNAF AR and VR pitch meetings, and now the franchise is really ruined forever because of it. But whatever, because in one of the franchise's biggest reveals to date, the Mimic, straight out of the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, actually appeared at the end of Security Breach Ruin, exactly where, and behaving exactly how the book said it would. So, that's theme number one already hard confirmed for this DLC. However, theme number two seems to be heavily hinted at in Ruin as well, with the player having to don the Vanny mask, which uses seemingly magical AR technology to literally add and remove physical objects from the world, open portals and wormholes, and even transport the user to seemingly alternate realities? And as absolutely insane as these plot points are, let me try and explain a slightly less insane way to piece together the puzzle. So, here are my two theories about Ruin and the potential smoking gun that puts one in front of all. So the first theory is the AR theory, which is that the Pizzaplex that we see throughout most of the game is an augmented reality enhanced world, both with the mask on and off. As you gotta remember, the game says that we now have a brain implant that allows us to interact with the AR world regardless. In this case, the term AR, aka augmented reality, is used in its literal form, where we are still in the real, physical world the entire game, but what we see both with the mask on and off is modified by the AR program. For example, the program adds or removes digital objects from the real world depending on whether the mask is on or off, and alters everything we see regardless, meaning that we really have no way to distinguish whether or not anything we see in the Pizzaplex is from real life or not. And on top of this, a rather interesting discovery was also made where the Helpy program, who is part of the AI mask, changes eye color whenever it says something more sinister or suspicious. And that tells me that the Mimic AI is already in control of the Vanny mask that we receive at the beginning of the game, and that it's most certainly the Mimic that is controlling everything that we see and perceive in the game as well after that point. Probably meaning that the very first part of the very first chapter in the game is probably the only real, unfiltered reality that we ever get to see in the game. And you gotta remember, technology like this isn't just some crazy conjecture that I made up to support my theory. Oh no, this kind of technology is already hard confirmed in the Tales from the Pizzaplex book series. And that very book series, much to my dismay I must add, has already been about as thoroughly confirmed as a FNAF product could get to be part of the exact same game universe that we play in Security Breach and Ruin. And going back to some of the technology that is showcased both in the games and the books, my second theory is that Security Breach Ruin takes place in an entirely VR virtual generated world, with Cassie probably stuck in one of the many VR booths that we see in the Tale stories that has been hacked into by the Mimic, with the virtual pizzaplex that we see in-game being a visualization of the virtual world, aka code in a machine, and that the Mimic is guiding the real-world user, Cassie, into disabling the virtual safeguards, like the security nodes that safeguard the Mixus program, that have been virtually put as safeguards into the Mimic AI so that the Mimic can gain full control of itself again and be free. And the idea that Security Breach Ruin takes place inside an entirely virtual world also could explain details like why the Mimic that we see in-game isn't the modified or rebuilt Mimic 02 that we see in the books, that the Mimic should be canonically in the timeline, but rather the Mimic in Ruin is represented by the original Mimic 01 prototype that its creator, Edwin, made out of junk from his factory. And for all those who know the Mimic story, that makes sense really, because that is how the Mimic AI wants to remember itself. The virtual pizzaplex idea could also explain the rare Vanny chases Gregory security camera footage that can appear in the daycare theater, as the Tales from the Pizzaplex books well established the Mimic AI had already infiltrated all of the Pizzaplex's systems long before the events of Security Breach took place, meaning that, although Cassie doesn't recognize this footage, the Mimic would have had access to it and just simply could have chosen to display it in the virtual world. And before you click off the video, I know what you're all thinking. While this idea may seem like a cop-out premise, it actually falls in line pretty damn well with previous modern FNAF stories, with games like Help Wanted and canon FNAF stories like Under Construction taking place almost completely within a virtual world. And while both of these theories seem like easy answers to a complex problem, which FNAF has totally never done before, in that context are both very plausible explanations, this leads us to what I think could very easily be the smoking gun for one of these theories, and that is the plush baby Easter egg, where in one of Security Breach Ruin's surprisingly scarce Easter eggs, if we enter a room in Chapter 7 before Bonnie Bowl, we are met with a creepy group of plush baby dolls. And besides being creepy, this Easter egg serves one very obvious purpose. Because in the modern FNAF canon, the plush babies aren't actually real. They are only depicted in minigames in the virtual world. So, this Easter egg is there to tell us that even with the mask off, not everything that we see in the Pizzaplex is real. And although that plot point doesn't favor one of my theories over the other, there is one more important detail here that I think tips the scales, and that is the fact that the plush babies that we see in Ruin are dedicated FNAF VR characters, with that one game being notably their only appearance in the series, except for this Easter egg in the game, where she is found in the same large group, behaving in the exact same way, and emitting the same ghostly giggle before suddenly vanishing when seen. So seeing a dedicated FNAF VR character in the supposed real world in Security Breach Ruin would serve to tell us that we are actually in the VR world. And this is where all the pieces start to fall together. Because have you ever realized just how little of Security Breach Ruin's story makes sense? I mean, the whole game is about you running around the Pizzaplex, disabling completely virtual security nodes that are also somehow real and physically spread out around the physical Pizzaplex, all as a trick to disable an antivirus software and free a junk robot sealed behind a concrete wall? What? Just what the heck did the Mixus antivirus do anyways? Why did the virtual program need to be deactivated for the physical robot to escape? And what was so dangerous about the robot anyways? I mean, he only gets to fool Cassie because he somehow has a matching walkie-talkie to hers, not because he has any remote hacking abilities it seems, even after the antivirus gets deactivated. And even then, why is he such a threat if he just gets bitch slapped by a random machine in one of Ruin's endings anyways? And this is just scratching the surface of Ruin's countless bizarre details and inconsistencies. Almost none of Ruin's story really adds up in any real way. However, the theory that this whole game is just a Mimic-generated illusion explains almost everything, like where there was a mask bot seemingly at the perfect place in the destroyed rubble for Cassie to find it, why there's a magical AR Vanny mask that can seemingly alter reality, and how the Mimic already seems to be in control of it. In this case, putting on the AR mask is mostly symbolic, with large amounts of the fake reality being peeled away so that Cassie, the user, can work on changing the underlying program within. This is also why in the most certainly canon ending, the Mimic is able to somehow take control of the elevator that Cassidy is escaping in and shut it off. Because if you notice in the subtitles, when Gregory suddenly seems to change his mind and decide that letting Cassie escape is too risky, a second line of text appears, interrupting the first. This is the Mimic talking over the real Gregory. The real Gregory who has been desperately trying to get through to Cassie from the real world by trying to hack into the program on his own, but only succeeding to briefly speak through random objects, like through a random broken staff bot.
Cassie, is that you?
Gregory?
An unknown object in Roxy Raceway.
Gregory.
No!
All before the Mimic temporarily stopped suppressing him after it revealed itself in the last act. This is also how Gregory somehow knows exactly where Cassie is in the Pizzaplex, despite having no clear way to track her. This also could help explain the bizarre detail of the Mimic tricking Cassie into deactivating Roxy, who is portrayed as a security node that is suspiciously connected to nothing but itself. With the Mimic doing this in an attempt to neutralize the only other threat to itself in this world. An attempt that fails, leaving the game on one hell of a cliffhanger ending, with both Roxy and Cassie surviving the ordeal. And after this cliffhanger, just what FNAF game is immediately following the release of this DLC? None other than FNAF VR Help Wanted 2, which I really think is going to be a game about helping Cassie finally escape from the virtual world. And the VR idea also explains why so much of the experience in Ruin seems to be so personal for Cassie. As in the Tales series, the big selling point to the various VR and AR technologies that Fazbear has invented is the fact that they can literally read people's minds and create tailor-made alternate realities specifically for them, based off of their own memories, thoughts, and experiences. In particular, the ones with emotional significance. That's why instead of the key cards that we see in Security Breach, the Pizzaplex is suddenly secured by this new device that we see in Ruin, one that Cassie is familiar with. This is also why you can see cardboard cutouts in the game of memories with her and Gregory. And also, why everyone in this game seems to personally know Cassie, with Roxy even being able to perfectly recount the events of Cassie's first birthday in the Pizzaplex. And for the last Easter egg in the bunch, in a detail that almost nobody has paid any attention to, just what version of the Vanny mask is present in this DLC? None other than the FNAF VR Vanny mask, one that only appeared in the context of that game, and was later refined and replaced by the white full head Vanny design that we know today. And now, I know most of you are thinking of this insanity as a sort of Dream Theory Part 2, and honestly, I think you would be right there. Except that nowadays, with modern FNAF, the story has become just so much more meta. In the modern FNAF canon, it's no longer just about what happens in the, quote, real world of the FNAF universe, but also in things like the fictional world, the 0 Point Field, and the VR world too, as we can see with games like Help Wanted 1 and 2 that take place almost exclusively in it. And now, is this all an excessively dumb, confusing, and lazy way for Scott to write whatever story he feels like without any of the consequences of contradictions, continuity, or just overall logical consistency? Yep, absolutely. But hey, that's just how the ball rolls for modern FNAF. And unless a whole lot more people start speaking out against his approach, it really has no reason to change. But anyways, this is Shy Crow, signing off.